Welcome to Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible. Today we're looking at Genesis chapter 32. There are 32 verses, beginning in verse 1. Jacob departed for his journey, and having looked up, he saw the host of Elohim encamped, and the angels of Elohim met him. Versus the Masoretic saying, Jacob went on his way, and the angels of Elohim met him. Jacob departed for his journey, very similar to went on his way, but having looked up, he saw the host of Elohim encamped. That was completely omitted from the Masoretic. Verse 2 says, Jacob saying, "This is the camp of Elohim," versus Elohim's host. So it is expressed differently. He called that name encampments versus Mahanaim, which very well is simply very well could be a translation of the word. Let me pause for a moment while I add that to my notes. We also notice in verse 5, "Tell my lord Esau that your servant might find grace in your sight." In the Masoretic, it simply says, "my Adon," doesn't say his name, and it doesn't call, Jacob doesn't refer to himself as a servant either. So you can see, not only is he more personable in the Septuagint, where he addresses him by name, because it is his brother, but he also calls himself your servant. I am your servant. Although, even in the blessing, did his father not tell him, "I've made you Lord over your brother Esau"? But in this instance, he is giving that title to his brother as a title of honor, to show his respect and esteem for him. Verse 10 says, justice. It says here, justice. "Let there be to me a sufficiency of all the justice," versus the mercy. So you're going to see that often. Instead of mercy, it'll say justice in the Septuagint. Verse 11 says here, "Lest haply, I'm afraid lest haply he should come and kill me." So this is Jacob's concern, that Esau will not just kill him, but he'll happily do it. It says in the Masoretic, nothing, "he will come and kill me," but Septuagint, he's happy to do it. You can bet that Esau is very much set in his mind and his heart that he was going to kill Jacob. So what changed his mind? What made him, what stopped him? What prevented him from doing that? We're going to look into this a little bit more, and it'll be revealed to us. Verse 20 says, "Propitiate his countenance. I will propitiate his countenance with the gifts," going before his presence. However, the Masoretic says, "I will appease him." So appeasing, I know it is similar, but to propitiate one's countenance is expressed in a much more poetic way. It is more, I believe, specific as to the purpose. You're propitiating his face. Instead of just simply appeasing him, it sounds more, it's a lot stronger in the Septuagint. Verse 25, Jacob wrestling with the angel. It says here that the angel touched the broad part of his thigh, and the broad part of Jacob's thigh was benumbed and is wrestling with him, the angel. Actually, it just says man, so we can't assume it's an angel. It's better just say, well, it's a man at this point. And then it says here in the Masoretic, he, meaning the man that wrestled with Jacob, touched the hollow of his thigh, not the broad part. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint. So which is it? Is it the hollow of his thigh or the broad part of his thigh? Either way, you can bet it's a part of his thigh. From pretty much the buttocks to the kneecap. It's any part from there, including the hip. A lot of people believe it is the hip. And that part of his body didn't come out of joint because otherwise Jacob would not be able to walk anymore. People don't understand that he would have to lock it back into place. When a joint comes out, you have to lock it back in. But no, it says here in the Septuagint more accurately that it just became numb. He couldn't have, there's no feeling in there anymore. He couldn't, probably no circulation in there. So that's an important distinction as well. Verse 28 says, you have prevailed with Elohim. This is the person, the man who is speaking to him, but it turns out it is Elohim. You prevailed with Elohim after wrestling with him, and you shall be mighty with men. Do we understand this, that he prevailed over Elohim, or did he prevail with the help of Elohim? Because we know in this wrestling match, yes, he was wrestling Elohim, or a representative of Elohim, and he, that entity had to benumb the thigh, the broad part of the thigh, in order to get away. But this person is saying, this entity is saying, your name will be Israel because you have prevailed with Elohim, meaning one of two things. You prevailed over Elohim, or you prevailed with Elohim. Well, it says here with, but with him, meaning with him in the match or with him in life. Because it's one thing to prevail in life, but it's another thing to prevail with the help of Elohim. So that's a big distinction. I find a lot of people who talk about Israel, they say, you have overcome God. No, it's you've overcome with God. That's a big distinction. You don't overcome by your own strength, but with God's strength, you will only prevail. So let's look at the Masoretic. It doesn't say that. It says here, for as a prince, you have power with Elohim and with men. That doesn't come off the same way, in my opinion. For you, okay, it's saying, Jacob, you're a prince, and you have power with God and with men. It doesn't say that. It says, you have prevailed with Elohim, and you shall be mighty with men. Not have power with them, you'll be mighty with them. Okay, and it says here, and have prevailed. So you can see the word order is out of order. It's for lack of better term. And we'll move on to verse 30 now. It says here, Jacob called the name of that place where they wrestled the face of Elohim. For I have seen Elohim face to face, my life was preserved. Here it calls him Peniel in the Masoretic. So that place is called Peniel. Very much could just be a translation, because I think Panav is face and El is Elohim in modern Hebrew, or in Hebrew. Looking at, let's look at what I wrote here. It says this account, Genesis 32, is more full. Gives you a more complete picture in the book of Jasher, because in the book of Jasher it describes how there were many camps of angels that met Esau. I believe it was 7 times. It was an intimidating, very large, intimidating army of angels. And Esau perceived them as men, but they were in fact angels, and he saw them multiple times. And each time he'd see a new wave and another wave of armies, and they would say, we're of Jacob. We're before our Lord Jacob. And Esau's going, oh man, he has an army. I got to be careful. And these armies scared the living daylights out of him. So you can believe, just like I said earlier, Esau was dead set on killing Jacob. He wasn't going there to not do it. He wasn't going to be appeased or placated for anything except for the fear of losing his own life via a massive army that could stand up to Esau's own armies. So the beginning makes more sense now when we read that Jacob met the says here, he looked up and he saw the host of Elohim encamped. Why were they camped? Well, we see in Jasher just why. They intimidated Esau. They changed his mind. And they were not there by accident. That wasn't there in verse 1 by accident. Nothing in the Bible is there just by accident. It's there for a purpose. And Jasher reveals that very purpose, that it was to save Jacob's life because he was going to be killed if not for God's intervention. They were not there by accident. No small detail in the Bible is ever there by accident. It's there for a purpose. And Jasher gives us the reason as to why. Verse 32, we see that the children of Israel will by no means eat of the sinew which was benumbed, which is on the broad part of the thigh, until this day, because, brackets, the angel touched the broad part of the thigh of Jacob, even the sinew which was benumbed. Masoretic reads very differently. It says, the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank. So it wasn't benumbed, it shrank, according to the Masoretic, which is on the hollow of the thigh, not the broad part, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh and the sinew that shrank. So you can see two very different interpretations of what happened and what part of the body it was. One saying it was the broad part of the thigh, one is saying it's the hollow of the thigh. Either way, it's part of the thigh, but one was a sinew, one, actually they're both sinews, but one shrank and one was benumbed. So that's all I have to say about this chapter of Genesis 32. I thank you for your time. May Jehovah bless you and make your way prosperous. Until next episode, we'll look at Genesis chapter 33. This is Jack Knight for Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible.